Hi, good evening, Ethan. Will you have a presentation to share so we can run a screen test, a screen sharing test, or?
No, I'm not doing a separate presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Hi, good evening, Dan.
Hey, good evening. You hear me fine?
Yes, can hear you okay. Chair Pont, we're ready to begin the meeting when you are.
Thank you, Ms. Gamero. Good evening and welcome to the Tuesday, March 1st, 2022 regular meeting of the St. Helena Planning Commission. If you'll give me a few minutes here, there's a couple of paragraphs I need to read before we actually get rolling. This meeting will be conducted pursuant to the provisions of Government Code Section 54953 as amended by AB 361, which authorizes teleconference meetings under the Brown Act during certain proclaimed states of emergency. The Governor of California proclaimed a state of emergency related to COVID-19 on March 4th, 2020. This teleconference meeting is necessary so that the city can conduct essential businesses and is permitted under Government Code 54953 in order to protect public health and safety of attendees. Consistent with Government Code Section 54953, the City Planning Commission meeting will be held via teleconference only and will not be physically open to the public. Commission members and staff will be teleconferenced into the meeting by audio and/or video. The meeting will be conducted via Zoom webinar. The Planning Commission will be live streamed on Comcast Channel 28 and on the city's website, barring technical difficulties. Those members of the public wishing to participate may do so remotely via Zoom electronic meetings in the following ways, either by logging into the Zoom link located on the meeting agenda and entering the meeting ID, or by calling a listed phone number and entering the meeting ID. Public comment for the Planning Commission meetings will be accepted via email to publiccomment@cityofsthelena.org. All public comments must be emailed by 4 p.m. prior to the meeting. Emailed public comments will not be read out loud, will be publicly available and attached to the online Planning Commission agenda. Ms. Gamero, do you have some additional information?
Yes, Chair Pont, give me 1 second. So for members of the public who wish to participate during public comment, you can do so by dialing 669-900-6833. At the prompt, you can enter the meeting ID 880-8211-8641. Press pound, and during public comment, you can press *9 to speak. And that will be all, Chair Pont. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair Hale, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Sure. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and for the republic to which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I would like to call this meeting to order. Ms. Gamero, if you take the roll, please.
Thank you, Chair Pont. Commissioner Rothfeld,
Here.
Commissioner Segura,
Here.
Commissioner Anderson, Commissioner Anderson, I believe you're muted.
Here.
Thank you. Vice Chair Hale
Here.
and Chair Pont.
Here. That takes us to item 3, which is public forum. This is an opportunity for members of the public to address the commission on items of interest to the public that are not listed on the agenda. Because of the restrictions imposed by the Brown Act, the commission may not engage in discussion nor take action on matters not described on the agenda. Please observe the time limit of 4 minutes. Ms. Gamero, is there anyone who appears to wish to speak under public forum?
I do not see any hands raised at the moment, Chair Pont.
Thank you. That takes us to item 4, consent items. Members of the commission or the public may ask that any items be considered individually for purposes of considering alternative action, for extended discussion, or for public comment. Unless that is done, one motion may be used to adopt all recommended actions. We have 2 consent items tonight. 4.1, which is the minutes of November 30th and January 18th. We also have item 4.2, request by Backen and Gillam Architects for adoption of a resolution granting a design review exemption in order to make exterior modifications to the front of the existing commercial building located at 1429 Main Street in the Central Business District. Does any member of the commission wish to pull any of these items for additional consideration? I don't see any. Ms. Gamero, does any of the public seem to wish to have an item pulled for further discussion?
No hands are raised, Chair Pont.
Thank you. That means a motion on the consent items is in order. If someone would care to make one. Yes, Vice Chair Hale.
I move that we approve the consent items 4.1, the minutes for 11:30 and 1:18, or 11:30:21 and 1:18:22. And item 4.2, and accept the required findings and approve a resolution granting design review exemption for the proposed exterior modifications to the front of the existing building at 1421, 1429 Main Street in the Central Business District.
We have a motion to accept the consent items as drafted. Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you, Commissioner Segura. Ms. Gamero, will you tally the votes, please?
Thank you, Chair Pont. Vice Chair Hale,
Yes.
Commissioner Segura,
Yes.
Commissioner Rothfeld,
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson,
Yes.
and Chair Pont.
Yes. That takes us to public hearings. We have one public hearing tonight. Item 5.1, ordinance adding chapter 17-138 time share uses and sections 17-138-060 to Title 17 zoning of the St. Helena Municipal Code and deleting section 17-112-130 of the St. Helena Municipal Code. I will open the public hearing. And at this time, if there's any member of the commission that has had ex parte discussions or contact on this item, that would be this would be the time to report any contacts they may have had. Is there anyone who wishes to fess up, as it were? Hearing none. In which case, we'll go to the staff report. Director DeRosa, please.
Good evening, Chair Pont and members of the commission. It's our pleasure to bring you this item for your consideration tonight. I know there's been a lot of discussion and anticipation for having this clarity in our ordinance. And so I will pass this on to our city attorney, Ethan Walsh, and also thank him for his really good work on this. So Mr. Walsh.
Thank you, Maya. Hi, everyone. For those of you I haven't met before, my name is Ethan Walsh. I'm the city attorney for the city of St. Helena. And I prepared the ordinance and the materials that went along with it. So I'm going to give you a brief staff report. As you are aware by now, the staff materials are fairly detailed, so I'm not going to kind of go through the ordinance in the same level of detail that I provide in the ordinance, but I just wanted to kind of give you some context for our discussion and then open it up for any questions that you have. So essentially the basic framework of the ordinance is that we decided that the ordinance would benefit from some updating. It's been on the books essentially since 1982 in its current form. It's moved around from time to time as to where it's been located in the municipal code, but the language of the ordinance has essentially stayed the same since that time. And it's really only in the last couple of years where this issue has kind of risen to the fore of people's focus that we decided that we need to take another look at it and thought that it would merit some updating to kind of modernize it and address any kind of concerns that we may have. It's consistent with kind of what we currently have on the books, but it just provides added specificity so that going forward we have some clarity as to how we can enforce the ordinance and address any concerns that we have with timeshares in the community. So first off, just to kind of the aspects of it that that have changed essentially is first, in the ordinance, we provided detailed recitals and findings that that kind of gave the context for both the original adoption of the ordinance and why we want to continue to regulate this use as we do, prohibiting it in residential areas. So we, in light of the fact that it's been on the books for so long without much discussion as to the merits of this regulation, we thought it was worthwhile to provide the detailed findings and recitals that are included in the ordinance. Secondly, and this is where kind of the lion's share of the kind of the revisions are, and that's in the definition section. We've updated the definitions, and just to give you some context on kind of the basis for that, we since the time that we originally adopted our ordinance, there's state law that's been adopted that regulates timeshares in the context as a business, not as a land use, but as a business. And so given that those state definitions are on the books and are something that are used to regulate the industry, we thought it was worthwhile to kind of start with that as a context, but then make some modifications as we thought were appropriate so that they would serve their purpose in the land use context to kind of regulate them as a land use as opposed to a business interest. So we've updated the definitions to define a timeshare use, and there's kind of different components to that. Essentially, we've defined a timeshare use, but then it kind of through the various definitions we describe what the accommodations that are used for the timeshare use are, what those accommodations are comprised of, and then kind of work our way through that. And if there's questions about that, I'm happy to answer that. But it's detailed in quite a bit of detail in the staff report. So I'm not planning on including that as part of my presentation unless someone wants to discuss it. Thirdly, we have updated and added specific provisions regarding enforcement of the ordinance. Under our existing ordinance, there is no specific enforcement language in that section of the zoning code. We don't do this with every component of the zoning code, but we felt like for this use specifically, it would benefit from having specific enforcement language. And the enforcement language that we're using is based on what we currently have in our code to regulate short-term rental uses, which are another kind of vacation-oriented use that impacts our residential neighborhoods. And so we thought that was kind of a good resource to use and something that the city was comfortable using as a mechanism to ensure compliance with our ordinance. So we've added that enforcement language into this new chapter that we've established. And lastly, our existing ordinance restricts timeshare programs within residential units. But in looking at how we wanted to structure this going forward, I thought that it made the most sense to do it in the context of our various zoning districts, and that it, given the impacts that this use has to residential areas in the city, and the fact that kind of the impetus for regulating the use, as is outlined in the staff report, is kind of the impacts that it has on the residential character of our neighborhoods, our residential neighborhoods, and the impacts that it has on our housing stock. And so it made sense to continue to restrict the use in residential areas. But under our existing ordinance, it's silent as to how that's treated in commercial areas. And so in light of that fact, and in light of the fact that really kind of the goal of the ordinance in addressing is to address the impacts that timeshare uses can have on a residential neighborhood, that it's not necessarily something that we have to completely restrict within commercial neighborhood or commercial districts of the city. And so as part of the ordinance, we're allowing that it would be a conditional use within the central business district and the service commercial district. There's other lodging uses within those districts that are allowed as a conditional use, like hotels, for example. And so this type of use, that's really a vacation oriented lodging use or kind of a short-term arrangement that people use to reside within a specific unit, is something that we wouldn't necessarily need to prohibit within the commercial areas, because it doesn't have the same impacts to our residential character. I do know we've received some comments on that and concerns about including that use within the commercial districts, but I did want to explain that there was a logic to that, and the logic is that the impacts that have been articulated both in our existing ordinance, in the concerns that we've heard from the community, and from from our analysis of the issue overall, are really focused on the impacts that you see to the residential character of our residential districts, and the impacts to our existing housing stock, and the fact that if more of these are bought up for timeshare uses, they won't be available for people to live in as kind of their permanent residences. And given that there aren't the same impacts, if we allow as a conditional use in commercial areas, we thought that made the most sense to move it forward in that respect. If there's any issues that you want me to address specifically, or areas where you want me to drill down a bit on the ordinance or kind of the logic behind it or the context, I'm happy to do so. I would just note, kind of as a matter of course, I know a lot of the comments that we've received and the kind of the dialogue around this issue has been centered on Picasso, because Picasso is active in our community, and their activity kind of gave rise to a lot of the discussion in this area. But I did want to emphasize that this isn't just about Picasso, it's about the larger kind of timeshare use and the impacts that as a generalized use could have on our on our residential neighborhood if it's unregulated and allowed to proliferate. So with this ordinance in place, both our existing ordinance and the modernized one that we have proposed for you today, that regulates that use, kind of consistent with the overarching goals that are articulated in our general plan, and kind of they address the larger scope of the potential issues that could come up as part of unregulated timeshare uses within our community. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have, or respond to any comments that you have at this point.
Does any member of the commission have a question for the city attorney? I do not see any hands raised at the present time. Thank you, Mr. Walsh. We may come back to you in a few minutes. But that takes us to the public testimony part of the public hearing. Ms. Gamero, is there a member of the public who wishes to speak on this item?
Yes, Chair Pont. We have Nasim Moel who would like to speak. Go ahead. You may.
Great. Thank you. Yes. Good afternoon, Commission. My name is Nasim Moel, and I work for Picasso as a public affairs manager, and I'd like to address the concern at hand today. I currently live in St. Helena, and I have lived here for the past perhaps 20 years or so, and 24 in total in the Napa Valley. I reside and I also raise my family currently here. I have a young son and 2 stepdaughters. I have lived and worked in this community for specifically in the wine industry. And something that I would like to note, there's a few things. While I also volunteer, I vote, and I also certainly support all of the local businesses. This has been a concern for me beyond Picasso. I currently live on Stockton Street, and I have noted that about 7 homes in my general square are empty. And those are empty due to, I'm not really too sure, but I imagine that those were second and third homes to begin with. That currently sit empty. We have no lively neighborhood during the holidays, during Halloween, when kids want to go trick-or-treating. And so when I think about this concern and talking about the social fabric of our neighborhoods, that's what I think about. I also think that this is the redefining of this ordinance is a bit of an overreaction. Our local economy is built on the service industry, namely what I mentioned before, world-class restaurants, wineries, and hotels. And the very nature of our operating model encourages co-owners to enjoy this lifestyle here in the Napa Valley. And yet we are now just simply suggesting that our way of life is one that attracts people, and people who would like to be involved are now being asked to own a whole home to be involved in that community. And I think that that is something we should probably consider. And further to this point, we're willing as a community with so many other issues at hand to encourage our city to continue litigating this. It's when we have those far more sort of grosser issues at hand. So if I think about the water issues that we have in St. Helena, not only the cost to us, we're also in the middle of a pandemic and we have a lack of labor. We are, still in the midst of a condition where we have a fire season every year, and we've seen that for the last 6 years. I think that those are things that we need to consider spending our time and resources on. When you consider that maybe there are 3,400 homes in our region, and yet maybe 5 to 10 of those may be a co-ownership home, is not something I think is cause for alarm. And I think that it's a small voice that perhaps is much larger and has been given stock to this conversation. Furthermore, I guess what I'd like to just simply say is that I think that the concerns that we're facing right now are something that happened well before Picasso got here. And I think if we could all agree that St. Helena truly is a place where second and third homes do exist, and that has happened long before they were here. And perhaps we should have considered that prior to a talk about, something that is not quite a timeshare. These are co-ownerships. They're people who want to invest in our community. It's not taking away housing stock either. And I think that we should consider what that larger, the risk is to redefining this ordinance could be to people who actually own these second and third homes, especially if they're, inherited in, and you've got multiple people on an LLC. There are things that we should consider before we take action. And I appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm afraid I had to turn my video off if anybody was watching because my internet connection claims is not stable. Ms. Gamero, do we have anyone else who wishes to speak on this item?
Let me give it a few moments here, Chair Pont, to see if anybody else raises their hand.
And I'll remind anybody who wants to speak, we're trying to limit you to the 4 minutes that we have on the agenda, if you would, please. Anyone else?
I do not see any more hands raised, Chair Pont.
All right. In which case, unless there's anyone else who wishes to speak, I will, at this point, close the public testimony section of the hearing and bring it back at least partially to the commission. If anyone has any more questions or questions for the city attorney, now would be the time to take the shot based on any testimony you may have heard. I do not see any hands. All right. And Ms. Gamero, there's no one else who wishes to speak. Ms. Gamero, do we have anyone else who wishes to speak?
Sorry, Chair Pond, my internet cut out there for a second.
That's been my problem tonight too.
No hands raised.
No? All right, then at this point, I will close the
Chair
public
Pond?
hearing. Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to make a follow-up end note to the staff presentation. One item that we will, just as a matter of housekeeping, in the ordinance that goes to City Council, we will be clarifying that in the SC and CB districts, we'll be amending those use tables to make a timeshare subject to a use permit. So that was just, it's more of a housekeeping thing that will go forward, but I want to make sure you all were aware that we will be adding that into the ordinance. Thank you.
All right. Well, let me once again close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission for discussion. Does anyone have any items concerning this ordinance they wish to discuss? I do not see any hands. All right. With that then, a motion would be appropriate. But before we get to that, I would like to remind whoever makes the motion, if they're making one in favor of the item as written, that the motion as recommended by staff is actually to endorse or approve the attached resolution. So if you are going to make a motion in that direction, if you could make it in that form, I would appreciate it. Is there anyone who cares to make a motion on this item? Vice Chair
I
Hale.
will. I would move that the Planning Commission adopt the resolution recommending that the City Council adopt an ordinance adding Chapter 17.138, quote, timeshare uses, and sections 17.138.010-17. 0.138.060 to Title 17, zoning of the St. Helena Municipal Code, and deleting section 17.112.130 of the St. Helena Municipal Code.
I'll second.
Do you want to just give John a minute to
I'm sorry, my internet is not the greatest at the moment. Did I miss a second from the commission?
I'll second.
Looks like we lost Chair Pond.
looks like John's probably going to try to sign back on. Can we just give him a minute to do that? Maya, did you hear from John? Did he, do you know if he is trying to sign back on?
I just texted him. I haven't got a response, but I imagine he's probably trying to reconnect. So yeah, I would just give it another minute or two.
Okay.
Still having some difficulties, so I suggested he call in. So
I seem to
Oh, there he
have
is.
partially reappeared. I think I had just asked Ms. Gamero to tally the votes, but I don't know whether that came through or not. Ms. Gamero, would you tally the votes, please?
Thank you, Chair Pont. Vice Chair Hale,
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson,
Yes.
Commissioner Rothfeld,
Yes.
Commissioner Segura,
Yes. Yes.
and Chair Pont.
Yes. Thank you. That concludes this item, which takes us to item 6, scheduled matters. We have no scheduled matters, which takes us down to item 7, department reports. Director DeRosa, do we have anything tonight?
yeah, I'd like to just give 2 brief updates, one on the Hunter project and the other on the zoning code update. So on the Hunter project, as you know, we started working on the final EIR. We determined that we needed additional data on the sewer. And so we are still waiting for the applicant's engineer to get us that data so we can complete the response to comments. But we're more than 50% done with the final EIR, but all the other work is on hold till we get that. So that's why you haven't heard anything on the project. And as soon as we have that ready to go again and we're in good shape, I'll obviously be communicating to the Planning Commission on that. And then on the zoning code, so the zoning code subcommittee met on February 9th. And there were 2 really important things that came out of that meeting that are going to require some additional policy feedback from the council. And the first item relates to that parking overlay district in the downtown. And there was an economic strategy report that was presented to the council in 2021. And one of the recommendations of that report was that there should be no CUP for formula businesses, but there really wasn't much of an in-depth discussion. And so when we brought that topic up again with the subcommittee, they decided, that's a pretty big issue that we should have some feedback from the city council on. So we have the parking impact going to them in the meeting on 3/22, and then the formula businesses are going to discussion on. Yeah, sorry, I got those mixed up. The economic strategy report was talking about formula businesses and what should be the thresholds for that. So that will be going to the council for discussion in April. And then the parking impact district on if we still want to require people to pay into the fees will be going to the council for a discussion on the 22nd of April. So I'm currently doing some research and getting those reports ready. There were some other follow-up items that were a little bit smaller in terms of not needing big policy feedback, but we will be having one additional subcommittee meeting to bring back some of those loose items. And also, as you know, the inclusionary housing report is still under review by staff, the city attorney, and our partner, the Napa Housing Authority. We have a meeting scheduled with the consultants at the end of this week to review their latest version. And if that is satisfactory and everything is responsive to our comments, we can then look at scheduling a joint meeting with the Planning Commission, the council. And then that would allow us to finish the affordable housing chapter, as you all, I think I've communicated that as well. So there's definitely some more work that we have to do, but hopefully this will avoid any delays once the public document goes live. So those are my updates for this meeting. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions for the director? No? All right. That takes us to item 8, agenda forecast. You will find on the agenda a link to upcoming city projects. This is also the opportunity for any member of the commission to ask for the inclusion of an item on a future agenda that is of interest to them. Is there anyone who has an item they would like to see included? I see no hands raised, which takes us to the end of the agenda. Good night. Thank you. This meeting is adjourned.
Good night.